what inspired you? Was it just your own success and you're like, all right, well, I figured out how to earn a lot of money, so I'm going to help other people do it. But what inspired you to really shift to helping people in the financial arena? And then, of course, what inspired you to write this new book about building a 7-figure expert business?
It really came from pain and frustration. And so, which is, I think a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to that. But just people in general. The point is that, I discovered Afformations in 1997. Yeah. When I discovered Afformations, I was living in a 300 square foot basement apartment. I had no money. I literally had $800 in my bank account. I had, no business experience, no marketing, no sales. The only funnels we had back then was funnel cake. So, I mean, it was like, trying to build a house with a rock and some sticks. It was like ancient times, right? So, but I realized that because I had this message, right? This epiphany, if you want. I said, I've got to get my message out, but how the heck do I do that? Right? I didn't know. I had no clue. So I had to invest, or I decided to invest, my money. Of course, I had very little money back then, but, I put up a makeshift website. I wrote my self-published book. And then, as I mentioned, I was published by Chicken Soup and things like that. But I still really didn't know how to make money online, and I realized I've got a global audience that I've got to reach here. Well, how the heck do I do that? Right. And so it was just, as money would come in, to my business, I would invest it. I would hire coaches. I would pay the gurus. I'd buy these different online courses. And what I realized over time was that these gurus suck at teaching. They truly suck. They cannot teach their way out of a paper bag. And I ended up spending over $500,000 only to find out that these gurus cannot teach their way out of a paper bag. And so I said, what the heck is going on here? So, I pay this guy, $10,000. I pay another guy $15,000. I paid, so much money, and there would be a little nugget here and a little nugget there, but mostly it was just pure frustration. And I would just say, what the heck do you want me to do? And they would never answer the question. And I'm like, wow, these guys suck. And by the way, I've talked to many, many people who've had the exact same experience as I have. Maybe hasn't spent as much money as I have, but, have exact same experience with the gurus, right? So I said, okay, so what do I know how to do? Well, yes, I know how to help people with their InnerGame. Great. I've written a lot of books about that. But then I'm like, well, wait a minute. I also know how to make money online because, I spent all this money and I've made some money. So I'm like, okay, why don't we teach people how to do that? Because the guys who are doing it can't teach. And so I said, why don't you come in, Noah? Because what people have said about me from the beginning is, Noah, I love how you break things down step by step. And I'm like, well, of course I do, because that's how I wish somebody would have taught me. And they never did.